Why does culture impact our identity so much? Culture is one of the most important aspects of an individual's perception of themselves in the world. It's not just the customs that we follow, it's not just what we eat, it's not just how we talk. Culture is the lens through which we interpret everything. So it's almost like when you move countries, your default identity software crashes or doesn't run the same. I left my home country when I was 23 years old. That was 7 years ago. In this time, so much has changed. I feel like I'm almost like a new person. Obviously, had I not moved countries, that would still be the case. I would be worried if in 7 years I didn't look back and think, damn, I've changed. Like, please tell me that you feel like you've changed from the person that you used to be 7 years ago and the person that you are now. However, if you add culture on top of it, it does amplify this change because culture is so deep within our identity and who we think we are that the moment that you move to a different country and experience a different culture, different language, everything, that sense of identity also changes. So I started to question myself after some time here in the US why that was the case. Because obviously, I knew that culture had a huge impact on our identities. I knew it. This is something that we all know, but experiencing it is different. And in 7 years, I moved countries twice. First, I was living in Colombia for 4 years, and then I moved to the US 3 years ago. But it wasn't until the move to the US that I felt this cultural shift so deeply within my identity. I think because the culture in Colombia and Brazil are similar, I didn't go through that phase of questioning myself, of feeling that I didn't belong. It was similar, or it was similar enough. And although the culture here and in Brazil are similar in the sense of being Western cultures, there's a lot of differences as well. And I feel like it's hard to pinpoint what is a matter of culture and what is just other factors going on in your life. I don't know. I was very confused for a long time. So, this time that I went to Brazil a week ago, when I was flying back, I started to ask all of these questions. And I wrote a lot, like, I wrote probably 15 pages on my notebook about this because I was just like asking question after question and trying to find answers and trying to access those feelings within me. And I wrote a blog post. I don't know what to call this, like a newsletter. I don't know. I just basically wrote it down and I'm posting it on Substack. But I also wanted to record an episode to share these feelings and to hear from other people as well. And for those who live abroad, or not necessarily in a different country, but maybe it's a different state, a different city, or you live in your hometown, but you also don't feel like you fully belong, then let's have a conversation. Come grab a seat at the adults table and let's talk about it. I'm Fernanda Rodriguez, and welcome to the adults table. So during these 3 years, in particular here in the US, I felt like I went through three phases, or I'm going through three phases. Number one, the honeymoon phase. It's that phase that you're a tourist. That's what you are, right? You don't feel like a resident. You don't see the negative sides of life in that particular city. Everything's great, everything's new. You're exploring, you're experimenting. It's the honeymoon phase. So I went through that phase and I thought that just by living here, I would automatically belong. I wasn't concerned at all about belonging. That was a great phase, the honeymoon phase. And then I moved to the second phase, which was the questioning phase. As time passed, you do start to feel more like a resident. And this is going to happen in any place that you go to. You might love the place so much in this honeymoon phase, and then sometime at some point, reality hits, right? You're like, okay, maybe I don't love this part as much. But when it comes to a different culture, what's very crazy that happens in this phase is that you start to question everything. I don't mean question your decision. I've never, not once, questioned my decision of living here. I love this city so much. I still have the honeymoon phase depending on what I'm doing, where I'm going. Like every single week, I feel like, depending on what I'm doing, I look around and I'm like, God damn it, I love this city, you know? So never have I questioned my decision. What I mean by questioning phase, and I will expand on this, is questioning myself. You know, that's when your sense of belonging starts to get shaky. I didn't quite feel like I was part of Brazil anymore. And I also didn't feel like I was fully part of the US. So that's when I discovered the in betweenness state. You just feel like you're in between. You're neither one or the other, you're just in between. This is so crazy to me because I thought that this just happened to me because of other aspects in my life. But when I started reading more about how other people felt, or even talking to friends, I realized that they also go through it. They also go through this phase, that this questioning phase is normal. You do start to question your identity. So I'll give some examples. I got here and I saw that it was when the clean girl trend exploded, right? I mean, is it I don't know if it's still a thing. I don't think it is as much as 2 to 3 years ago. I saw all the girls wearing their hair either slicked back or with the Dyson waves. And I'm like, I don't that's not really me. Like the clean girl trend is not really me. So if that's the mainstream definition of feminine and I'm not that, then who am I? Am I feminine enough? I would go to places here in Chicago and I think it's a pretty big city. There's diversity and all of that, but I would be the only person in a workout class of, I don't know, 30 people with tattoos. So all of a sudden I'm like, is is this feminine enough? Like things that I never questioned before, or questioned to this level. So I started getting my head about it. Like, am I too, I don't know, am I feminine enough? And then the other thing that happened is that I've always taken pride of my communication skills. Okay, I've learned to write and read by myself before even starting school. When I was in high school, my first year of high school, in my first Portuguese essay, I got graded a 0 because the Portuguese teacher was confident that I had not written my essay. Because in her opinion, it was so well written that I couldn't have done it. Like a student couldn't have done it because I was 15 years old. Is that, I think it's 15, right? First year of high school? I think so. But anyway, I've always thought of myself as a good communicator. And when you're in a different culture, speaking a different language, you might know the language enough to get by, to say what you want to say, to ask for what you want to ask. You can use it as a tool, but I cannot express myself in English nearly as well as I can express myself in Portuguese. So if I'm not a good communicator, then who am I? You start questioning so many things about yourself that in your culture, maybe you didn't question those things. And maybe if you go to a different culture, you're going to start questioning yet other things. So it's so crazy how much that can influence the way that we see ourselves. And then the third phase, we're still talking about the phases. The third phase is the integration phase. I haven't lived that yet. I'm just assuming that it exists. I think I guess I could say that I've lived that in Colombia, but because in Colombia I didn't feel like I went through a questioning phase, I don't place these two experiences in the same category, you know? But I believe in the integration of opposites, and I've been feeling better about myself and more authentic, and I've been feeling less of a need of having to be a certain way to belong. I don't know. Because of that feeling, I will assume that the integration phase exists. And when I say integration, I don't mean fully become one culture or fully feel like you belong in one place. That's not what I mean. When I say integration, what I mean is navigating different culture layers as opposed to repressing one or the other. A scenario in which both identities coexist, know which lanes to occupy, and are governed by a solid sense of identity in the center. A sense of identity that knows how and when to be flexible. So I've started to feel more like moving towards an integration phase. But again, it doesn't mean that you don't navigate between the three forever. Maybe that's the case. Like I said, I still feel like at sometimes I'm in the honeymoon phase. I still question myself and I still feel like I'm starting to integrate. So it's just weird that now it feels like it's the three all together. So let's dive deeper into identity, belonging, culture, language, and how to adapt and how to navigate a new culture. Okay, because it's too many questions here, too many questions about why does language impact belonging? How? Isn't language just a tool to communicate? How do we create our identities? Do our identities change? Are they supposed to change? So, a lot of questions. Let's start talking about identity. But before we dive in, I just want to do a quick disclaimer here. This is not a political conversation, okay? It's not meant to be something that will describe everyone's experiences living abroad. It's not meant to, like, no, it's just my individual experience and my own thoughts, okay? That's about it. Anyway, so our identity is how we see ourselves and how we think other people see us. It's the story that we tell ourselves about who we are. And some people think that identity is something completely individual. You have your own identity, someone else has their own identity that is only based on personal traits and individual experiences. But that's not the case. And it's important to understand. It's important to understand how your identity is broken down. Some of the main clusters, let's call them clusters, are number one, the personal aspect, which is what we talked about here, which is your personal traits and the individual events. For example, I'm curious, I'm introspective. These aspects are essentially who we are when no one's watching, right? So, yeah, that's part of it. But another part of it is the social cluster. It's who we are in relation to others. You're from a certain nationality, you're a daughter, you're a mother, you have certain roles, right, in a society. So that's the social aspect. The number three is the cultural aspect, what it means to be you in a cultural context. I love Jung. I've mentioned Jung many times here in the podcast, and I'll continue to mention because I do like his work. Carl Jung. Carl Jung. I never know how to mention his name, pronounce his name in English. See, dude. I was a week in Brazil, and when I tell you that my English is gone, like I came back this week and I can't even. I I'm losing all my words. But going back to culture, Jung talks a lot about archetypes and how these archetypes reflect what's valued in a society. So we embrace traits that are valued and reject others that aren't. We're going to talk more about culture because again, it's at the center of the conversation here, but essentially, depending on the culture, what it means to be you is going to shift. Number 4, there's a professional aspect. This one is easy. Some of us are highly identified with our profession. So, who are you? I'm an artist. I'm a doctor. I'm an architect, right? So, this is also part of our identity. These are just some, okay, that I wanted to highlight, but it's a complex thing. It's not just, oh, this is what happened to you. These are your personal traits. No, and understanding this is important. And beyond the cultural aspect and how culture shapes identity or influences identity, it's important to understand that we build our sense of identity by seeing how we are seen by our family, by society, by culture. I cannot say this enough. We see ourselves in others and we see ourselves in the way that other people see us. And the second thing that's important for us to understand when we talk about identity is that our identities aren't fixed. They're not meant to be fixed. You're not going to have an idea of yourself when you're a kid that's going to be the same one as when you're an adult. And that's going to continue to change throughout life. And there are going to be events in our lives that are going to challenge our idea of who we are, our identity. So we have to align our expectations in that regard. We don't have to protect our identities as if they cannot ever change. No, they will change. They're meant to be stretched. And there's a way of finding certain pillars that ground us while allowing other parts of ourselves to change and be flexible. So let's have our expectations aligned in that regard because we do fear losing our identity. We feel like anything can be a threat to our identity. And the moment that we feel threatened, we don't allow ourselves to change and to go through the flow of life because we're so concerned about securing and keeping that identity safe that we don't allow ourselves to see past it. And then, second, you have to discover what that looks like in a different context, in this case, in a different culture, right? So it's important to allow your identity to be stretched. Okay, so what about culture? Why does culture impact our identity so much? Culture is one of the most important aspects of an individual's perception of themselves in the world. Okay, it's not just the customs that we follow. It's not just what we eat. It's not just how we talk, how loud we speak. Like it's not just that. Culture is the lens through which we interpret everything. A culture is going to determine what we think is right, what we think is worthy, what's rewarded, what should be repressed, so on and so forth. So if I live in a culture that represses a certain side of my personality, I'll probably also repress that side. If it's not accepted or if it's not praised, why would I even get in touch with it, right? But if I move cultures and all of a sudden that new culture doesn't really care for that side or they praise it, then I might highlight it. So you see, like, it's just this is the obvious way of how culture impacts our identity. So it's almost like when you move countries, your default identity software crashes or doesn't run the same. Changing the default identity, quote unquote, software can cause a few things. Number one, we reprogram key concepts. We've been talking about this. What's considered polite, rude, good, desirable, funny, feminine, that changes based on the culture. So you have to also reprogram key concepts. Number two, it causes an identity confusion. I've been talking about this for the whole podcast. If I'm not who I used to be, then who am I? You get confused. But on top of that, it causes a feeling of disconnection. The tension between who I am and who I must be might result in a feeling of disconnection from ourselves and others. And if you live abroad, I don't know if you feel this way, we're going to talk about it, but to me, sometimes it's almost like there is a glass between me and others. It's weird. Like that's the sensation that I have. And we're going to expand on that, but the feeling of disconnection is very real. And then there's another thing that is the constant self-monitoring. You start questioning, am I too much? Am I too little? Too loud? You start asking questions and being in your head for things that you weren't even aware of before. So you're going to be in the middle of a conversation and you're going to be self monitoring. You're going to be like, oh, did I pronounce this word correctly? Was my accent too much here? Could they understand me? It's a constant self monitoring and it's exhausting. There's also a feeling of inauthenticity. As we start to create masks to adapt, which by the way, they're not fake, okay? They're not bad, they're necessary. Creating masks and personas is a necessary social effort. But we end up having a hard time understanding what's a persona and what is really who we are. Another thing that happens, and I'm going to talk about two more points and we're going to move to belonging, but the development of a hybrid identity. So you don't just switch between one culture to the other. You develop a hybrid identity. You're not fully one or the other. You're in the middle, and that is it's hard to deal with. It's confusing, it's kind of disorienting, it's weird. And last but not least, we live in a state of liminality. It's a transitional phase where you no longer find yourself in a previous state, but you have not yet fully transitioned to the next. There's a lot of in betweenness. There's a lot of, okay, I don't belong there and I don't belong here. So where do I belong? Okay, so to recap, culture is one of the most important aspects of the way we see ourselves, of our psyche, and it's something that we experience without even noticing. And one of the earliest things that penetrate our lives, it's culture. Okay, so all of these points that I talked about that impact your sense of yourself once you move countries are going to affect your sense of belonging, which is a core human being need. So to belong is not to feel like you're quote unquote one of them. I wasn't born in the US. I didn't grow up here. This won't change, nor do I wish that it could, honestly. I'm very happy with where I grew up. I wouldn't change that for the world. So the fact is that, yeah, I'm not from the US, and that's fine. So I don't think that to feel like you belong, you have to lose your roots. Belonging is about feeling understood, it's about feeling seen, it's about feeling safe. Belonging is at the core of what it means to be human. For the majority of human history, we relied on each other for better chances of survival. We had to belong, right? But it also helps us shape our identity and it gives us meaning. It feels that feeling that we matter, right? So belonging is a core human need. It almost feels like belonging gives our identity structure, right? It almost grounds our identity into something. For example, you say, I'm an artist, I'm Brazilian, etc. Belonging is very connected to our identity. And I cannot say that I don't feel understood here or that I don't feel understood at all times, or that people don't take interest in learning about my background. But somehow, like I previously mentioned, I feel that there's a glass between me and them. It's hard to explain, but I learned the role of language in that. So I want to expand on that particular feeling and talk a little bit more about language. Because at the end of the day, is language just a tool for communication? What is language, right? So let's talk about it. Language was the least of my concerns when I moved to the US. I could speak the language well enough to get by. A part of me was anxious about only working in English. A part of me was very self conscious every time I started a conversation. Or when I was talking to someone, I'd be like, are they paying attention to my accent? Are they judging my accent? Are they understanding me? Are they, I still do to this day. Sometimes I'm in meetings and I'm like, have I said something that didn't make sense? Is this person laughing at my accent? Like, I still get in my head. I think that's normal. But overall, I wasn't like, oh, language is going to be a huge problem. I'm not going to be able to do the things that I want to or ask for the things that I need because I don't speak a word in English. No, I did speak English when I moved here, so I knew that there were going to be terms that I didn't know that I had to learn. I had to expand my vocab. I didn't know so many things about the culture itself related to language, like, I don't know, names of cereal that people used to eat when they were kids, or shows they used to watch, or baseball terms, slang. I knew how much I didn't know, but I wasn't scared because I had the minimum that I needed to survive, you know? But I didn't realize that a language is much more than a tool for communication. Only when I heard Fernando Meirelles, who's a Brazilian film director that directed The Two Popes, City of Gods, etc. Only when I heard him say in an interview that he likes to direct in Portuguese, not in English, because he understands English but doesn't feel English, did I start to understand what languages actually are. He explained, and I love this so much. I want to get a tattoo of this because I think it's such a good way of explaining language. He says, mango tree in English is just a tree. In Portuguese, mangueira, which is the Portuguese word for mango tree, is my mother. I love this quote so much. It's so beautiful because, yeah, mango tree means nothing. Mangueira, there's an emotional meaning attached to it. There's a connection to the word. So it's not just words, it's emotions, it's feeling, it's belonging so much. So I had no idea of how much language would impact that idea of myself. So today I think of language in three ways. There's the communication layer, which we know about. It's a tool to communicate. Can you make yourself understood? Can you ask for what you need? But there's also a layer of perception. Does your choices of words make you seem appropriate, funny? Certain words that you use might make you seem funny here and completely inappropriate in a different language. Do you have the access to the vocab that you need to show a certain side of you? For example, if I lack access to a certain vocab, I can hesitate to position myself upon disagreeing with someone. And I can seem like I'm passive, right? But it's because I don't have access to vocab. So Perception changes, the way that others perceive us and the way that we perceive others. And then maybe the deepest layer is identity. Do you feel like you're a different person when you speak your first or second language? Are you more direct in your second language, more aggressive? And going back to the emotional piece, I remember that once I met my partner, him and I have been together for 6 years. So when we met, I would never say I love you in English because it just didn't hold the same value, emotional value, as eu te amo in Portuguese, right? Today I can say both and I can access the same feeling by saying either one, right? But in the beginning, that wasn't the case. But it takes shared experiences and effective memory to remove that imaginary glass that language can place between us and others. So, to summarize up until this point, the relationship between identity, culture, language, and belonging. We develop our identities through the idea of who we are and how we think others see us. And by the way, I'm reading from the newsletter. Culture plays a huge part on this as it validates or rejects sides of us. When we change cultures, so do the mirrors through which we see ourselves, thus challenging the idea of who we are. Our sense of belonging is also challenged as we struggle to find ourselves in a new hybrid identity and might not feel understood. In this context, language is not just a tool for communicating, but something that holds memory and emotions and is a currency for connecting with a community. Okay, that all being said, how can we navigate this? How can we better navigate this? To be honest, I'm still learning. I don't know. I still feel inadequate at times. I still yearn for more effortless connections. I still question if I'm confusing myself with a new persona or if I'm putting enough effort to belong in the first place. I don't know. I don't know if people who have been here for like 20 years, 25, or whatever, been here, meaning being in a different country. I don't know how they feel. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear from them. But there's some aspects that I've been focused on and that have helped me enormously in the past few years. The first one is you have to do your part. If you're the type of person who refuses to get to know the culture of the place that you live in, you're not helping yourself. You're not helping that sense of belonging. You have to get out there. You have to learn the language. You have to have a good proficiency on that language. Go learn. I think that's important. I think you do have to do your part. And I have to be honest with you. Number two, I think we have to realign expectations on two fronts. We have to understand that identities are supposed to be stretched. Stop being afraid to change and drop the idea that your identity should be fixed. Really, the most authentic version of yourself is not behind you. But to know the most authentic version of yourself, you have to allow yourself to challenge the idea that you have of who you are. So, identities aren't supposed to be fixed. And the more you resist that stretch, that change, that expansion, the more you're going to suffer. Also, you have to realign your expectations with the fact that you may never feel like you fully belong to one place, and that's okay. There's an objective chance, really, that you will always be the other, both here and there, in your home country and the country that you live in. And yet, we can find ways of belonging, and honestly, we can find ways of thriving. So we have to become at peace with the fact that we might never feel like we fully belong to one single place. It's just what it is. It doesn't mean like we're not going to be happy. It doesn't mean like we're not going to find amazing people and connect with these people on an intimate level. It just means that, yeah, maybe belonging's not attached to a place. And that's okay. The third thing that I think is important is that we have to accept the liminal space and we have to stop trying to rush belonging. The third one is that we have to accept the liminal space and stop trying to rush belonging. You're used to a culture that you've lived in for what? 20 years? I don't know, in my case, 23 years. It's okay if it takes time for me to feel like I belong or belong more in the country that I'm living in. The fourth point is connect through emotions, not just language. I'm actively working on this one as well. To connect to people, there are other ways that go beyond just talking, just, language. If we share experiences, I don't know, it might be going to a concert, it might be a pottery class, a dinner party, whatever makes sense to you. These experiences might help remove that glass and create emotional memories and make us feel more connected to the places that we live in because we're more connected to the people that live here. Which brings me to my next point, which is we can create meaningful micro communities. A lot of times I think that I have to have groups of friends, like, oh, I have to have 10 friends, 12 friends, 20 friends, 40 friends, whatever, how many, however many, I don't care. But I always think of volume. But if we have ourselves a micro community, a couple of people that we are close with, that we nurture those relationships, that helps our sense of belonging and it can grow from there. Last but not least, most importantly, and the most difficult one, focus on building a solid yet flexible identity that remains authentic and resilient. A solid identity, my friends, is not one that never shifts. It's one that knows its anchor points and can adapt without self abandonment. How do we do this? That's the $1 million question. I think honestly, it's by living and by driving self awareness. That, like, there's no secret. But there are two ways that we can invest on this particular point. First, by guiding ourselves in values, not roles. Roles change all the time. And if the moment that I change roles, I feel like, and what I mean by roles here is not the professional sense of the word, but like the role that you occupy, that changes all the time. And while values can also change or they take different shapes throughout life, some values are like pillars to our personality. During conversation, an example that I liked came up, which is it's as if you have a house that has a solid foundation, but its walls can change and its windows can open and the house remains still. So we have to find what those pillars are and focus on those versus the roles that we occupy. Because the moment we don't occupy them anymore, we completely lose self worth. The other thing is that in order to build that solid foundation, we have to integrate instead of discarding. What I mean by that is that instead of getting stuck with the idea of replacing one culture for the other, we have to replace that for the idea of stacking culture layers. So I can be both. I don't have to be fully one or the other. I don't have to repress one or the other. I don't have to become just one or the other. I can be both and I can stack those cultural layers, pull things from each culture that I like and honor those things. So, yeah, my friends, maybe there's a world in which we feel an unquestionable sense of belonging wherever we are. But if there isn't, honestly, I'm okay with it too. Because the reality of life at the end of the day, whether by changing cultures or embracing other changes, is that life and our identities are dynamic and ever evolving. So, deciding to have the courage to allow that identity to take a new form instead of resisting and feeling threatened by it may be the only path to feel whole. If you also live abroad or just in a different state, different city, and you can relate to these feelings, comment below. Let me know what other insights you've had because I think this is one of the things that it's hard for us to name. And once we speak to other individuals who feel a similar way, we can also start to understand a little bit more about our own feelings. So I appreciate any additional insights that you all have and any other tips on how to belong in a different culture. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode at the Adults Table.